Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, February 11th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Trump says cancel the Gaza ceasefire if all the hostages are not released. So this is not good. President Trump said on Monday that the Gaza ceasefire should be canceled if all Israeli hostages are not released by noon this Saturday. Trump said, quote, if all the hostages are not returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off. Let hell break out, end quote. So he stressed that all remaining Israeli hostages should be released by Saturday, which is not part of the deal. Trump said that the decision was up to Israel, but his comments suggest that he's ready to back Israel if they restart the bombing campaign. And these comments came after a spokesman for Hamas's armed wing announced that the next Israeli hostage release has been postponed until further notice, citing Israeli ceasefire violations. So this was kind of the big news on Monday that Hamas announced this, saying that they're going to postpone the next hostage release, which is supposed to happen on February 15th, unless Israel does these things to comply more with the ceasefire. And then Trump came out and says this and says, hey, I say cancel the whole thing if they're not released. Again, if you watch the video, he makes it like, oh, it's, this is all up to Israel. It's not my decision. But Israel needs U.S. support, needs U.S. bombs, weapons, political support, intelligence support in order to do this. And so this is a sign that Trump is willing to give that to them. So since the ceasefire went into effect on January 19th, Israeli forces have killed dozens of Palestinians in Gaza, including 3 who were killed on Sunday when they were trying to return to their homes in Gaza City. I covered that yesterday. And Gaza officials have said Israel has also not let in sufficient aid deliveries into Gaza, including materials needed to provide temporary housing for Palestinians. They say they need way more tents than Israel has allowed in, and Israel has also not allowed, I believe they're like trailers that they're trying to get in there for temporary housing, and Israel has not let any of that in. So Abu Obaida was the one, he's the spokesman for Hamas's Qassam brigades. He announced this on Monday, and he said that the hostage release scheduled for February 15th will be delayed until, quote, the occupation commits to and compensates for the entitlements of the past weeks retroactively, and we affirm our commitment to the terms of the agreement as long as the occupation commits to them, end quote. So later in the day, Hamas released another statement saying that it announced its intention to delay the hostage exchange to give mediators time to get Israel to live up to its end of the ceasefire. Hamas said, quote, Hamas's intention in releasing this statement 5 days before the date scheduled for the release of the captives is to allow the mediators enough time to pressure the occupation to fulfill its commitments and to keep the door open for the exchange to take place on time, as long as the occupation meets its obligations, end quote. So in response to Hamas's announcement, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz claimed that it was a complete violation of the ceasefire agreement and hostage deal and ordered the military to be on the highest level of alert. I've seen reporters in Gaza saying that the Israeli drones are buzzing over their heads and Israeli jets have been flying over Gaza now. And Hamas's announcement came a day after Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, reported that Netanyahu intends to sabotage the ceasefire deal and that the Israeli negotiators in Qatar are not expected to bring the deal into its second phase. One Israeli source said that once Hamas realizes there would not be a second phase, that it may not complete the first. And then one reason why Hamas may suspect that there won't be a second phase is everything that Trump has been saying. He keeps discussing his intention to take over Gaza, saying that the Palestinians cannot return. We'll get more into that in another story. And there was a Hamas official, Bassem Naim, who's based outside of Gaza, he spoke with Al Jazeera and said Israel was intentionally sabotaging the agreement. And Itamar Ben-Gvir, the leader of the Jewish Power Party, who quit the Netanyahu government over the ceasefire deal, has called for Israel to immediately start bombing Gaza. So Ben-Gvir said, quote, Hamas's announcement should have one real-life response, a massive fire attack on Gaza from the air and land alongside a complete halt to humanitarian aid to the Strip, including electricity, fuel, and water, and including the bombing of aid packages that have already been brought in and are in Hamas's hands in Gaza. We must return to war and destroy, end quote. So Ben-Gvir is saying, bomb the aid that we've already let in. So, and this is one thing, again, going back to all these comments from Trump, basically him continuing to outline this plan that would require the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. That's a signal to Hamas that the U.S. is not serious about making sure Israel implements the deal. That gives Hamas little incentive to release more hostages because it's their only real leverage over Israel. So this thing, there's a chance of this all blowing up. Hopefully, there is some work happening in Qatar and that the mediators and that there's negotiations happening so this thing doesn't explode. All right, so the next one here, Trump says no right of return for Gaza Palestinians under his plan. So in an interview that aired Monday, President Trump explicitly said Palestinians would not have the right to return to Gaza under his plan for the U.S. to take over the territory. When asked by Fox News host Bret Baier if the Palestinians would have the right to return to Gaza, Trump said, quote, no, they wouldn't because they're going to have much better housing. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, end quote. So this interview was taped on Saturday, and Trump, I should say recorded, I guess taped is kind of an outdated term, but Trump made similar comments the following day while aboard Air Force One. And this is what I covered yesterday. He said it was it would be a big mistake to let them back in. So again, this is something he said on Saturday, but it aired on Monday. I mean, it has been like just about every day that Trump's saying, yeah, no, I'm talking about permanent. You know, this is permanent and we're going to take over Gaza, even though the whole plan seems so absurd on its face and not really practical or doable. He continues to double, triple down on this. And the problem here is, again, is that there's a very fragile ceasefire in place right now. And all of this, it's sending the signal to Hamas, giving them incentive not to release the hostages. And it's giving Netanyahu and his allies the incentive to restart the genocidal slaughter in Gaza and find a pretext to do that. They could use this announcement by Hamas. So everything, this is just really on edge right now. And another thing, he's still saying that he can make a deal with Jordan and Egypt to let him in. Egypt has announced an emergency Arab summit that will be held on February 27th in response to Trump's plan. On Sunday, Cairo said that in recent days, its foreign minister, quote, made a series of phone calls with several Arab counterparts to mass regional efforts in a bid to thwart the U.S. proposal of displacing the Palestinian people, end quote. So the Arabs are united on this in their opposition. Abdullah, King Abdullah of Jordan is in the U.S. and he's due to meet with Trump on Tuesday. So we'll see what comes out of that meeting and what Trump says during their joint press conference. I mean, if he's, man. All right, so the next one here, Netanyahu to opposition. Trump offered revolutionary plans. So this is an interesting article here from Haaretz. And I know people point out to me that it's technically Haaretz, but I'm just going to go with Haaretz. So this is about Netanyahu essentially getting in an argument with the opposition in the Israeli Knesset. And he's telling the opposition that what Trump has offered is everything we wanted. One thing he said is, you're always talking about the day after. What are the long-term plans for Gaza? Well, here it is. Trump has given it to us. This is the day after. So again, we talk about what Trump said, how it's emboldening Netanyahu. And we're seeing a lot of support in Israel for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And now this is something that's really on the table and that they're trying to turn into official policy. We know that this has been what they wanted, all along, basically. But Now they're saying it outright. And you had members of the government like Ben Gvir, Smotrich, who would call for these things outright. But Netanyahu was always a little hesitant to say what he really wanted to happen to Gaza. But again, just been emboldened. And this is just about the argument that he had with the opposition. All right, so the next one here, Israel expands open fire order in West Bank. So Haaretz reported on Monday that the Israeli military command overseeing operations in the occupied West Bank has expanded its open fire orders, leading to a surge in the killing of Palestinian civilians by IDF troops. One of the orders allows Israeli troops to fire on unarmed Palestinians if they are messing with the ground. And that is how the report put it. If they're messing with the ground, they can be shot at. And the idea here, the claim, is that this order is necessary to prevent explosives from being planted, but sources told Haaretz it has made soldiers trigger happy. And then the other order allows Israeli troops to open fire on any vehicle approaching Israeli military checkpoints that are leaving combat zones to force them to stop. Since the combat zones are residential areas, this means that the IDF can open fire on civilians trying to flee. And these orders led to the killing of a husband and his wife, Sudnus Shalabi, who I covered this yesterday. She was 8 months pregnant, and she was shot and killed by the IDF. The initial report said that her husband was critically injured. This Haaretz report says that he was shot dead, that he was killed by the Israeli troops. And essentially how this went down, according to this report, was that the husband was shot and killed while driving his car near Tulkarm, just because he was driving toward a checkpoint, which was necessary for him to get out of the area. And Shalabi, his wife, was shot dead after managing to get out of the car. So the car was getting shot at, she got out. And then according to an IDF investigation, the way that they justified shooting her was because she looked suspiciously at the ground. So an 8-month pregnant woman, which if a woman's 8 months pregnant, you can tell even from a long way off. And they shot and killed her because she looked suspiciously at the ground. No weapons or explosives were found in the car, which was also carrying their 2 children. Doesn't look like they got shot. Palestinian officials said paramedics could not attempt to save their lives because the IDF troops blocked the ambulance. So there have been many other incidents of civilian deaths in the Israeli military's current operation in the West Bank, dubbed Iron Wall, which was launched on January 21st. In one incident, IDF troops shot a 2-year-old girl in the head while she was inside a house eating dinner with her family. On Saturday, Saddam Hussein Iyad Rajab, a 7-year-old boy, died of his wounds he sustained by Israeli gunfire 10 days earlier. And they justified him because he was messing. They justified shooting him because they said he was messing with the ground. I mean, what's your reaction going to be if you're facing Israeli troops with their guns pointed at you? Are you going to maybe look at the ground? I mean, it's a 7-year-old boy. It's just completely barbaric. And this is what the U.S. is supporting by continuing to arm and give all this military aid to Israel. So this Haaretz report also revealed that the Israeli military has been using Palestinian civilians as human shields to check for explosives inside buildings, a practice that became common in Gaza. The report said that another Palestinian woman, 21-year-old Rahaf al-Ashkar, was killed on Sunday by an explosive charge placed at the entrance of her home that was placed by the IDF. So essentially this is according to the Israeli media account. This woman was in her home. The Israeli military ordered whoever in there to leave. And then they placed an explosive charge in front of at the entrance. And when she opened the door, it exploded and she was killed. So they're saying that they ordered her to leave and then she didn't leave. And then they planted the explosive and then she came outside and was killed. I mean, how is that? It's just completely out of control. And, they're just terrorizing these people. And then what did they do? When they went into the house, they sent in, the report says that they picked a random resident of the refugee camp. This is Ner Shams, a random resident, to check the scene and make sure that no other explosive charge had been placed that the soldiers were unaware of. So they sent in a Palestinian civilian using them as a literal human shield. All right, so the next one here, U.S. says that the Israeli pullout from Lebanon is on track. So this article is from Jason Ditz. So on January 12th, it was guaranteed by a U.S. envoy that Israel would withdraw from Lebanon by the January 26th deadline. So he's talking about last month, the U.S. said, yeah, don't worry, Israel's going to be out by the withdrawal deadline. Israel said that they were committed to the deal, but then they sought an extension for the withdrawal, and then it was pushed back to February 18th. So February 18th is coming up, and now we're seeing a familiar thing happen here. It's been reported in the Israeli press that the White House is taking a hard-line position that Israel will definitely leave by February 18th. This is built around spokesman Brian Hughes saying that Israel's pullout is on the existing timeline, and confirming that Israel has not yet formally requested any further extension of their presence beyond that date. But it is also being reported by Israel's Channel 12 that Prime Minister Netanyahu has requested that President Trump support the further extension of Israel's military presence inside southern Lebanon. So they want to continue the occupation of southern Lebanon. And then the whole pretext, again, is that the Lebanese army is not sufficiently prepared to take over the south. But a big problem is that the Israeli military is occupying many of the places where they're supposed to go. So they're trying to continue the occupation of southern Lebanon. And this is an area where we could see things really escalate again. And another place where Israel has just continue to bomb and shoot and kill people throughout the whole so-called ceasefire. All right, so the next one here, Syrian Shi'ites flee to Lebanon after border clashes and crackdowns. So this is another one from Jason. The situation on the Lebanon-Syria border remains tense. Relative calm was reported today, though others reported hearing sporadic gunfire in the area. Overt Syrian army invasions, as were seen Thursday, though, have not recurred, at least not yet. The situation is far from normalcy, with the Lebanese army continue to reinforce positions and announce that they're extending the deployment in the area near the Syrian border. So, and Lebanon's new president, Aoun, spoke with Syria's de facto ruler, who is al-Julani, or now he's Ahmad al-Shara, going by his real name, the leader of HTS. So the tensions continue, and the Shiite groups in in these border areas are fleeing to Lebanon. A lot of Shiite clans span both sides of the Syrian-Lebanon border as well, and reportedly a lot of them are deciding to leave Syria in favor of Lebanon. Most of the towns and villages on the Lebanese side of the border are overwhelmingly Shiite, and Lebanon also doesn't have a government run by a group that's so closely linked with al-Qaeda. So, and again, this is after the clashes between HTS, which rules Syria now, and these Lebanese clans that live in the border regions. And there was an actual incursion by the HTS forces into Lebanon. So the situation is still very tense. All right, so the next one here, Russia says the outlook is not good for U.S. arms control. So a senior Russian official said Monday that the outlook of extending or replacing the last nuclear arms control treaty between the U.S. and Russia does not look good. So the New START treaty limits the number of nuclear warheads and delivery systems that the two powers can deploy, and it is due to expire on February 5th, 2026. There's no sign that the two sides are working on a replacement treaty. And again, this is the last piece of nuclear arms control between the U.S. and Russia. So this is Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov. He said, quote, "As for our dialogue with the U.S. in the area of strategic stability, including the situation concerning the post-New START period, it does not look promising. On February 5th, 2026, the pact expires, and after this, it will not exist," end quote. So in 2023, Russia said that it was suspending participation in New START, citing U.S. support for Ukrainian attacks on Russian facilities housing nuclear weapons. While the inspection aspect of the treaty has not been implemented, both sides said they would continue to abide by the limits set by the treaty, by the which limits the number of warheads and launchers that they can have deployed. And as far as I know, both the U.S. and Russia have been within, they're staying within those limits. But once this treaty expires, there will be no constraints on the number of nukes that the U.S. and Russia can deploy. So there's a lot of other reasons that, there's a big risk of a new arms race here. And this is one of the main reasons why. So President Trump has been sending some mixed signals on all this. He recently said that he wants to work with Russia and China on denuclearization. He claimed that in his first administration, Putin really liked the idea. One thing, he's saying with Russia and China, China has a vastly smaller nuclear arsenal than both the U.S. and Russia. And it seemed like Trump's arms control people from his first administration were essentially trying to sabotage the New START treaty by trying to include China. When for China, this thing limits the number of warheads that each country can have deployed at about 1,550. China, as far as we know, only has about 500 nuclear warheads. So it doesn't make sense for China to be part of this deal. Russia doesn't have an incentive to pressure the Chinese to do it. Russia's response was, okay, if we're going to do a trilateral deal, can we, add the UK and France because they have a similar number of nukes as China. The US says China's like rapidly building up its nuclear arsenal, but still, as far as we know, it's like they have something like 500 nuclear warheads. So that was Russia's response. So Ryabkov mentions that, basically saying that they just weren't on the same page during the first Trump presidency, despite Trump kind of making it sound like he was close to some kind of denuclearization deal. And then the reality is that the first Trump administration pulled out of two arms control treaties, the INF Treaty, which prohibited medium-range land-based missiles, and the Open Skies, which allowed unarmed surveillance flights over each country's territory. And Russia has also linked the prospect of arms control talks with the U.S. to the proxy war in Ukraine. Last year, the Russian Foreign Ministry said that it was not possible to hold arms control talks in the face of the U.S.'s hostile policies toward Moscow. Ryabkov said that the talks could happen once there's been a shift in U.S. policy, but said that hasn't happened yet despite Trump's call for the war in Ukraine to end. So this is one thing, just a lot of danger here, I think, in the risk of an arms race, and Trump also signing that executive order for the big missile defense system. Russia's basically saying that they're going to respond to that. There's just a lot of things aligning here. So hopefully diplomacy happens and we get moving on a resolution to the war in Ukraine. This next one is not looking great. Mike Waltz says that the U.S. must recoup Ukraine aid by taking natural resources. So this one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. President Donald Trump's national security advisor explained on Sunday that the White House will push for access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals as the U.S. has invested a considerable amount of money in Kiev's war effort. Most of Ukraine's mineral wealth is in areas held by Russia. That's something I didn't realize, is that most of the 53% of the minerals are in the oblasts that Russia has annexed. They don't control all the territory, but it's in all the territory that Russia claims now as its own. So on NBC News, Mike Waltz said, quote, "The president is prepared to put all of those issues on the table, including the future of U.S. aid to Ukraine. We need to recoup those costs. That will be a partnership with the Ukrainians in terms of their rare earth, natural resources, oil, and gas," end quote. So the remarks echo statements from Trump and Zelensky. Trump saying they're looking to do a deal on rare earth minerals in exchange for military aid, and Zelensky is saying that they're ready to do it. The Americans should earn the most from what they've done. So this is not a good sign. And the fact that you have Mike Waltz kind of just going out and saying these things, how they've all, it is amazing how you see these guys who are all just kind of, went with the establishment line on everything when it came to foreign policy. Not that this isn't what this is about. The rare earth minerals and taking Ukraine's resources is certainly a motivation for this intervention, for this proxy war. But it's also something that few of them would say openly. I mean, Lindsey Graham said it, but just to see Mike Waltz say, oh yeah, we need natural resources from the Ukraine now, it just kind of rips the mask off the whole pretending like this is about democracy and freedom and all the things that the Biden administration would say. But anyway, not a good sign. The last story here, Trump raises tariffs on aluminum and steel imports. So this is an article from Reuters about Trump's latest tariffs. So Trump moved to substantially raise tariffs on steel and aluminum imports on Monday, canceling exemptions and duty-free quotas for major suppliers to Canada. Sorry, I messed that up. Canceling exemptions and duty-free quotas for major suppliers, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and other countries in a move that could boost the risk of a multi-front trade war. Trump signed proclamations that raised the tariff rate on aluminum imports to 25% from the previous 10% that he imposed in 2018 to aid the struggling sector. His action reinstates a 25% tariff on millions of tons of steel imports and aluminum imports that had been entering the U.S. duty-free under quota deals, exemptions, and thousands of product exclusions. So the proclamations were extensions of Trump's 2018 Section 232 national security tariffs to protect steel and aluminum makers. A White House official said the exemptions had eroded the effectiveness of these measures. So this is a real ramping up of the tariffs. And again, we'll probably see retaliation from some of these countries. So he's really, really tariff happy. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints. We have one from David Stockman, Make the Ukraine Truce, then Cut Europe Loose. One from Ron Paul, The U.S. Should Not Take Over Gaza. And I really appreciate Ron Paul in general, but I just love the fact that he's got all this attention on him right now with Elon Musk saying he should audit the Fed, saying he should chair the Federal Reserve, which, of course, that would all be great. And he's still putting out his anti-war message. This was his column for the week, that the U.S. should not take over Gaza. And then he always puts out his column as a short video. And, he put that out on X or Twitter. So I was happy to see that while he's getting all this attention from Musk, he's still sticking to his guns. One from Jonathan Cook, the Gaza war was a lie, as is the ceasefire Trump just told you. One from Joseph Solis Mullen, the illusion of wartime prosperity. Spotlight from Hunter Deresnes, Trump apparent Gaza scheme endangers his entire legacy. And that is absolutely right, and a very good article to go read by Hunter. And speaking of Ron Paul, there's a Ron Paul Institute conference coming up in Texas. So if you are in the area, or I would say a Ron Paul conference is certainly worth the trip. It is on Saturday, March 22nd. And if you are an antiwar.com reader, you get a nice little discount. You put in a promo code antiwar, and you could get a discount on the tickets, which are, it says $65 to $75 for the tickets, which again, for these Ron Paul conferences, they're really always great. And some of the speakers, of course, Ron Paul will be speaking. U.S. Rep John J. Duncan Jr., we've been running some great stuff from him. Tom Woods, David Stockman. And I always mention David Stockman because we run his articles all the time from his website, and we're very privileged to be able to run basically all his foreign policy stuff, as far as I know, because they're just great articles, and they're usually behind a paywall on his site. But I mean, if you're not reading his article, like his stuff, he's very radically anti-war, anti-intervention. I really appreciate all his writing. So it would be really great to see him speak. Jeff Dice will be speaking, and then Daniel McAdams, the director of the Ron Paul Institute. And so definitely, if you can make it, it's March 22nd. So I can't make it because I will be speaking at the New Jersey State Libertarian Convention on Saturday, March 22nd. So if you're a libertarian in New Jersey and you're not sure if you should go to the convention, I think you should, because I'll be there. This is, when it comes to these things that I speak at, just the nature of our work here, I always change the topic of what I'm going to talk about, because it's like there's just so much changing and happening. So, I have a few ideas I haven't nailed down yet, but that should be fun. So that's March 22nd in New Jersey. But definitely check out the Ron Paul thing if you're in the area or if you want to make the trip. Okay, so that is it for the news. That's everything for me for today. You could always support this show by telling your friends about antiwar.com. Comment, like, and subscribe. Follow us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, X. Follow my account on X. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.